Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you.
Hello. Before I start this episode, I wanted to jump on quick and share some exciting news with you. My book, Mind Over Magic, is now available for purchase. In it, I talk about our ideas about magic, and I get into some of the science behind what we thought was magic just a couple of decades ago. You can buy the book at folkloringlife.com, and if you would like a personalized dedication, just send me a message and I will make sure that happens. You can also get it in bookstores or on Amazon. If you do get it, it would really help me out if you could leave a review on Amazon. It helps me with visibility, which really helps with sales, and I would truly appreciate it. I would also love to hear any thoughts that you have on the book. If you'd like to continue the conversation about folklore and magic, find me at my school community, Folkloring Life. You can find links for the book, for my community, and a bunch of other stuff on my website, folkloringlife.com. Now, on to the episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Folkloring. And today I'm here with Seth Lamancusa, who is the host of Stitch Chats, and we're going to talk about his work, his interest in UFO and conspiracy theories. But before we get into all of that, first, welcome, Seth. Thank you for taking the time to be here
Thanks so
today.
much, and thanks for having me.
Sure. So, have you been folkloring lately, and if so, how?
Yeah, yeah. I think probably the most appropriate thing would be a bit of a meditation routine. I've been trying to get up off the ground, just a couple minutes when I wake up and a couple minutes before I go to bed, trying to find a little bit of inner peace, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that works. As for me, I've been kind of back in the kitchen because it's cold. And so my father's family came from Greece. And so I've been trying some traditional recipes, and I just happen to have a bunch of potatoes and a bunch of garlic. So I decided to try the traditional dip, the scordalia, which is like a really garlicky sort of potato dip that you dip bread in with olive oil.
I
It's
love Mediterranean.
amazing. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing lately, sort of connecting to my ancestors. So let's talk about you. Can you tell listeners who you are, what the path that you took to get to where you are today, and then we'll talk about your work in a bit.
Yeah, yeah. That's a tricky one. I think I'm very young. I'm only 22. I'm actually 23. I missed my birthday. Um, I'm 23, so I haven't been around that long. I don't know who I am that well, frankly. But I've
Fair
taken a bit
enough.
of an interest in the UFO UAP subject. And I came on your first show as a kind of an investigator. Really, I'm more of an engineer at heart. I've always been interested in computers, in coding, and then in data science and artificial intelligence. And so that's what Stitch is ultimately about. It's a place where humans can interact with artificial intelligences. So these days, that's what I spend most of my time doing. I code, and then I also Stitch is more of a side hustle. I've got a job working with AI as well. So I spend all day, every day in front of a computer screen, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid AI as much as possible, because it really just sort of goes against what I believe in, what my philosophy is, because it's pretty rough on the environment. Both from the standpoint of using a lot of power to, power up, and also it's hard because the servers need sort of precious, gems, precious minerals. And so, it's like you never know, is that the mining going to be ethical? Are we stripping the earth of all of this? And so I'm pretty hesitant. And there's also, the artist side of it. So I think that it's not for me personally, but like I appreciate like the innovative ways that people are starting to find to use it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I hear the environmental concern, I mean, there's about a million risks associated with it. To my eye, the people who've brought the technology to market over the past couple of years have done so fairly irresponsibly. Um, and I mean, in a way, it is Pandora's box. There's no putting it back in the box. And so I build with it, and mostly I build with it because I simply find it fascinating. But as far as the what's going to counterbalance that these environmental costs and these potential like personal and like mental health costs that it's having on people, going to be, I think,
Right,
the
right.
ability for it to connect people. I think that I think it's
Well,
going to I think it can be used to build bridges in a way that isn't entirely obvious right now with the people who are bringing it to market and the products that they're offering.
yeah, I mean, and like, now it's still so often wrong, right? So it's like you need to be
Horribly.
really careful with
Yeah.
it. Yeah, and obviously I know a lot of authors, I know a lot of artists, and so, it's really hard to see their style being taken, and it's like you can tell it's that style, and they'll even say on certain sites like, "Oh, this such and such artist style." But it's like a bad version of it. It's like the Timu version of
Mhm.
it, right? And so, and it's really hard because writing is hard, right? Writing a book is hard. Writing stories, it's hard. Even, if you're writing a blog, it's hard because you put a lot of time into it. You want to make sure it's quality, and then to see stuff that's just churned out, that's terrible, and people are, buying it instead of supporting the artists, which was hard enough
It's
before
a real,
AI.
it's a hot spot. I think at the end of the day, I'm optimistic about AI in the arts and in empowering individual
Hmm.
artists to create works that they wouldn't have been able to create otherwise, just on a technological level. AI as a tool for art, but it's a shame that it has been thus far trained on a very great many works that were not really attributed. And I mean, artists,
Right.
they were all blindsided. It was really it was a massacre. And so even to this day, you've got author groups and you've got plenty of groups going up against these AI companies. Uh,
Yeah, and I mean, the laws that are in place for protecting work, it's like what is it, 75 years? If it was written more than 75 years ago, then you can use it. And those don't, it's just like it seems like they skirted around the spirit of those kinds of
to me,
laws.
the nature of technology, where like they're just having their way with it because the legal system has never seen it before. They just fired starting
Right.
gun, and now they're leaving everyone else out to dry a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about the storytellers that I know and how with the internet, right, we started getting back to instead of like blockbuster movies, people are telling stories to each other again. And I think that's a really
So
positive
valuable.
direction. And yeah, and I was talking to a guy that told me the the story about a haunted doll. And it was such a great story. He was so compelling and entertaining. It was Richard the doll. And it's in a museum in Florida. And it was great. And it's like, there are certain things that only people can do. And, like, and certain ways of thinking that are going to have to come from people. So part of my hope is that people realize that a lot of AI stuff is crap, and they're going to want to
The
go
vast
back to the
majority.
storytellers, yeah. So anyway, but that's not what you're doing. So that's not, that's just a philosophical discussion,
Absolutely.
right?
I'm doing something fairly unique with Stitch, and I try to be conscious of like the broader AI conversation and the different angles to it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how you got interested in investigating alien phenomenon. How did you stumble on that
Yeah,
path?
100%. This is a comprehensive story. Last time I came on your show, I was here with Ed Wilson, and we were talking about the Gemini UFO, which was a UFO that was simply found in the back of a binder containing the old archived materials of an original NASA engineer for the Gemini mission. So Presumably, one day he goes home with a photo of a UFO, sticks it in his binder. It got passed down to his assistant, then to her stepson, and then it got auctioned off to Ed, who I've been investigating the photo with. So that's basically what got me into the subject as an investigator. Before that, what had happened was I took a philosophy class at my college, and my professor had kind of brought to my attention some of the things, some of the strange circumstances around UAP today, especially the ongoing government disclosure, which is actually going to be coming to a bit of a head tomorrow with the release of The Age of Disclosure on Amazon. Have you heard of
Hmm.
that documentary? This is going
No,
to
I
be
have
like
not.
34 of the kind of prominent whistleblowers that have been coming forward over the past couple
Oh.
years, and they all came together and made a show. So it's going to be quite mainstream and official by like disclosure standards.
And can you let people know what UAP
Yeah,
stands for?
that's unidentified aerial phenomena. It's the replacement term for UFO that we came up with in like 2017 when it got raised back to the public attention that there were still like investigations in the government going on into UFOs.
So the Gemini phenomenon, these images, and what's your feeling on it? Are you
Not
sold?
100%. No, certainly not. First of all, it's just the one photo, really. I mean, most of this binder that Ed bought was just old, like, pictures of the rocket when it was under construction and, like, of the original control room and stuff like that. And, like, never before seen photos. Super cool historical NASA materials. But, this is not a, it was just tucked into the back of one of them was this photo of a UFO. So that's what really got us like, oh, is this real? It's like with a bunch of real NASA photos, but is this photo real? So what we did was we went and looked into the mission, and within those catalogs, there's a mysterious photo or two, and I don't want to take too much time here talking about the Gemini UFO because people can go watch that other episode
Mhm.
or other appearances that Ed and I have done on that investigation. But in general, we haven't been able to authenticate the Simpkinson archive photo 100%. Although we have found some strange circumstances surrounding the Gemini 11 mission as a whole.
So a lot of people I talk to when I say like, how did you get into this kind of thing? They're like, oh, I was interested since a child, but it seems like this was sort of new for you fairly
Yep, that's
recently.
exactly right. I mean, you would have counted me among the skeptics, and not even among the skeptics, not even among those who would like ridicule the subject. I never even really gave it the time of day. I didn't even know it was as big as it was, and I would have been the type to assume that it was just a bunch of like people who are kind of susceptible to an online rabbit hole, susceptible to a conspiracy theory,
Right.
who wind up getting a hold of some blurry images and blowing it out of proportion online. But the more I looked into it, the more lore I started to uncover, the more history behind the subject, both in like the military context and in like the personal encounters context that gave a lot of credibility to the subject and the people who talk about it that I wouldn't have given them before. But it happened overnight for me. It's true.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's really interesting because for as long as I can remember, people who believed in UFOs were treated as crackpots, right? And but then you think like, well, why is Area 51 like why is it, so heavily guarded and people can't get in there and it's like what's going on there? And I think that one of the effective ways to shut down something is to ridicule the people that believe in it, right?
100%.
And yeah, and so if the government wanted to cover something up, it wouldn't be let's like try and silence everybody who has, touched this, right? You try to do that, obviously, but the real way would be to get people to not believe. And that's like I think about even like current day conspiracy theories. It was like what was it? Were they cannibals? The cannibals in the pizza parlor basement or whatever. Like these kind of things come out, and if people are just like, come on, it goes away pretty quickly, right? Like nobody's talking about Pizzagate anymore because the people who believed in it, and that one crazy person who went there trying to like prove it was true and get into the basement that didn't exist, we laughed it down. It was like don't be ridiculous. And I think that that's a great way. So why do you, having studied conspiracy theories, why do you think people want them or need them? What do you think drives that? Because they all seem pretty ridiculous to me. There are very few that seem even vaguely credible around the
I mean, they're the
edges.
epitome of the unknown. To me, that's about where it comes from. They're basically, it's the suggestion that there's people who are hiding something from you. And by definition, you don't know what it is because that's they're hiding it. So on one hand, you have it's almost indisputable that people are hiding things from you, especially like the government. Like the government doesn't tell us everything. Like we know that they've got a track record, but
Yeah,
as far as what individual claim has any kind of verifiability, you get quickly lost in like speculation because ultimately we're just operating at the edges of like human knowledge, like public perception, like at
right.
the edges of what we can even coherently talk about.
Right. And I mean, I think that it was hilarious when the government came out, was it about a year ago? And it was like, oh yeah, aliens are real. And everyone was kind of like, huh, all right. Like it just like didn't make this big splash. And I feel bad for the conspiracy theorists, right? Because they've been talking about this for decades and everyone's been making fun of them and they've been treated like, crackpots and they like all of a sudden it's like, really, guys? Really? Like we've been telling you this, you've been making fun of us, and now you're just like, yeah, whatever. It's like that's gotta be so frustrating, right?
There are bigger revelations yet to come, I think, as far as the government's concerned. I mean, so far we've gotten like Senate hearings and like House committee hearings and like a handful of ex military whistleblowers and stuff. But we haven't had anything official from like the office of the president or the White House or the Department of Defense or anything like that. So I think the day that they start, and I mean the Pentagon kind of started the ball rolling on this back in like 2021 or whatever when they confirmed the FLIR video and the gimbal video and that set of Navy videos, but they haven't really come forward as far as to say that like non-human intelligence is real in the way that a lot of these whistleblowers are saying. So I think the snowball is accumulating by the day.
Yeah, and it never made much sense to me that there wouldn't be other life out there in the universe because, like, how could we be the only planet and we have very diverse, life on this planet and we're the only ones? It doesn't seem like it could possibly be
100%. And that's
right.
what gets to me the most as the kind of analytical, skeptical type is, I mean, you've got something called Fermi's paradox that people have been puzzled over for, 70 years or whatever. They've been thinking, okay, so we know in theory how life came about on this planet, or at least we think we do. We think that it's, or at least we can trace back all the way to, say microbes at the bottom of the ocean. Okay, who's to say there's not a warm ocean somewhere else in our galaxy that, life could have formed on a couple million years ago? And if they even had that little bit of a head start on us, then we'd assume that um, it's there's a big philosophical piece to all this that I think gets overlooked most of the time in the conspiracy circles, especially.
And we can't assume that other life has the same temperament as we do. Like, we've slowed our development as a species down just like unbelievably because we like our war. We like, people like to be in power and they go to war and, cultures are destroyed. It's like if we were of a different temperament and we didn't like that and we were more, cooperative, then we could be so much further
Yes.
along because so much knowledge would not have been lost. And I
100%.
think
And
that
I'd even
that's
go as far as to say that like our temperament will change over the next like say 500 years of the future of humankind. Like we will have to cooperate more because we're operating at a global scale we've never seen before. We're not just going to be able to keep uh, you know, threatening each other with nukes until the end of time. It's like if we ever want to cooperate with the earth in a sustainable way, then we're going to need to work together. And I think you're right. Our temperament will wind up being very different, and even the way that we think currently about other potential, like say extraterrestrial species and their motivations is going to change a lot. It's going to have to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that with the sharing of information globally is a whole different thing now. Traveling is a whole different thing. Moving to different parts of the world is very different than it was a few hundred years ago, right? And I think that that will, and people are people. They're going to make friends. They're going to fall in love. We're going to get more and more homogenized. And those massive differences that say, oh, we're going to other these people and say that they're bad, that's going to become less and less possible, right? What are they're calling it now the extinction burst of when something, a way of life is dying, right before it does, the people who are benefiting from it start freaking out. And they get really, really like upset trying to, protect that way of the lifestyle. And because they want to stay in power, they want to have the advantages or whatever it is. They're saying that like we're seeing that now. And all of the divisions between people and stuff is a group of people that look very much like you and I, who are wanting to stay in power, and that's they're freaking out about it. It's not sustainable, and it's fairly predictable, and so it is going to happen. It's just a matter of when at this
100%. And
point.
I think I'll add on to my answer from earlier about conspiracy in general. One of the reasons that it's so compelling but also confusing is because you assume that these same people who are concealing information from you, any information that they're concealing, and rather any information that actually gets let out would have to be kind of intentional, you would think, right? Like if they're really like you'd think they're already keeping secrets, especially if they're as powerful
Yeah,
as we think they are and they've been in charge for as long as we think they have, then they're pretty good at keeping secrets. Which is to say that any
right.
conspiracy that we do wind up discussing about the powers that be is going to be sort of shaped by them inevitably, or if not directly planted by them, you know? So that's what also makes it hard to have real productive conversation.
It's funny. I don't know why this suddenly, I was reminded of this. The earliest conspiracy theory that I know of, and it's probably not the earliest one that existed. It's just the one that I always find hilarious. So when the Bible was being written originally, it was a very political process. They were picking and choosing what they were going to include in there. And it was a bunch of, old white men who were deciding what was going to go in and what was not. And so it, ended up being what it is. And of course, it's changed over time because it's been translated. And when it's translated to English, which version are you using? All of that. But the original stories were picked, right? A bunch of people who were scholars or priests or whatever. They wrote down whatever story they wrote down and they turned it in. And then there was this, big meeting. And so obviously some things didn't make it in, right? And people being people, and this is one of the reasons I think conspiracy theories are ridiculous, it started to leak out that there were other stories that didn't make it into the Bible. And there was this conspiracy theory, and I think it was based in the Caribbean. It was people who they heard about these other pages and basically decided that the white men, or the white people, were keeping the real power for themselves because they had these other secret stories that nobody knew about but them. And all it really was is it was like the ones that didn't make the cut. And so there was a huge fear of these, religious white men that had this powerful magic that nobody else had. And so that's just my favorite conspiracy theory that they believed that and that what like a dumb, mundane answer it really
Yeah, I
was.
think if you're one of those powers that be, it's to your benefit to make everyone think that you have grand powers that you do not.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is one of the reasons why the moon landing conspiracy always seemed ridiculous to me because not only would all of those people have had to been like, oh, we'll keep quiet for the rest of our lives, there are no deathbed confessions, nobody ever got drunk, but Russia and China both agreed that they said, oh yeah, we failed. US beat us, It's like, why would they do that? Why would they say, yeah, the US is better than us? It makes no
No,
sense.
I've always been skeptical of the moon landing conspiracy myself.
Yeah.
Well, why don't I continue my story where I left it off? I
Yes,
discovered
please.
Ed's book, and actually, in the intervening time between then, that was almost a year ago, almost precisely a year ago,
Mhm.
that I was handed Ed's book by
Oh,
my professor. And
oh,
Ed, I think he mentioned on, I want to be sensitive with this information, but I believe he's mentioned it on at least a podcast or two that we've been on. He's cousins, not first cousins, but cousins with Dr. Hennessy Powell, who is a
mhm.
neuroscientist and does some research into ESP and related phenomena. And so
Oh,
at the time, I was connected with her as well. She's also well connected with indigenous communities. So she's
okay.
kind of guided my path in some ways as well. So
Mhm.
what happened after I discovered Ed's book was over the next couple months, I was getting more and more into it. I began to meet some people online who were claiming kind of paranormal experiences or sightings of UAP. And I wound up going around the country for a little bit, trying to find footage of UAP for myself. Because if you'll recall, late last year, there were a lot of headlines about the like New Jersey drones. They weren't just in New Jersey; they were all over the country, and they were these like low flying drones that couldn't be accounted for by the FAA, or at least the FAA. It was a whole story. The FAA initially came out and said that they were working with three other federal agencies and also local police in New Jersey. The FAA said they were working with three other agencies, including Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, if I'm not mistaken, and local police to investigate this presence. Well, once Trump took
Mhm.
office, Caroline Levitt got on the stand and said, no, these were actually FAA research drones the whole time. So, as far as I'm concerned, to this day, we don't have a great answer to the New Jersey drone wave of late last year. But it is part of what drove me to go across the country trying to get footage of these things for myself because it seems like there's unidentified objects in our skies and it's somewhat interesting and curious to me. So, I go off to Utah and I get some interesting footage. I've got this footage in a vault. I haven't released any of it. But Utah's not the only place I went either. What happened in Utah, however, was somewhat foundational for a different reason, and I think I'll tell this story in relative detail here, just because I was kind of reminded of it recently and it was refreshed in my memory. Um, Before I went to Utah, it wasn't just the New Jersey and drones, and it wasn't just Ed's book that drove me out to Utah. It was also some dreams that I started having, some relatively
Oh.
intense like symbolism and synchronicity that started popping up in my life. So, for example, one of my friends that I made online, just trying to like connect with other people who were in this space, was having
Mhm.
somewhat profound dreams at the same time. And one day, shortly before I went to Utah, I had a dream that my eye had come out. So it just popped right out of my head. It wasn't painful, especially. It was very vivid. I remembered it in the morning for sure. And that same night, my friend had dreamed of a ship called Sleipnir. Sleipnir is the name of two things. One, a Malaysian construction vessel. That one's relatively
Hmm.
uninteresting. It's also
I did not know
yeah.
that.
Well, you wouldn't.
I know the
The
other
other
one.
one is what it was. The construction vessel was named after, which is Odin's steed in the
Yeah,
sky, eight-legged horse
right.
thing that he rides across the clouds. Well, Odin, here for your first synchronicity, lost his eye. He sacrificed his eye famously, and I'm sure you know a fair amount of
Right.
this story
Right.
at the
Yeah.
tree of that I can't pronounce.
It's pronounced Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil. Good, that's good to know. The tree of Yggdrasil. Yeah. So
I mean, Tree of Life
tree of
works,
life.
right?
Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't know the translation either. So what happened was I went out to Utah and we were hiking kind of in the mountains, kind of in the hills, the foothills, trying to get some decent footage. And we heard this coyote howling. These coyotes, more than one. I mean, just wolves, and they were making a a ruckus. It started like instantly. Like it scared us. It's really startled us, and they were howling, they were yelping, they were growling.
I've got coyotes in the forest preserve across the street from my house. And I didn't realize it until I moved in here, but the sound that they make, particularly when they are hunting, is the most terrifying thing. It sounds otherworldly. It sounds like some like
It does, and
monster is out
it's
there.
remarkable.
Yeah,
It really
yeah.
startled us. I'll tell you that much. Yelping and growling and howling and like a whole pack of them. It was crazy. But so what happened was they like stopped as suddenly as they started, and we were all kind of bugged out because we're looking up at the sky for UFOs anyways, so we're in no state of mind. We get back in the car and I opened up my phone to two messages. One was from the girl who I told you had the dream about Sleipnir. And she texted me that she'd had another dream the night before involving a hike up the mountainside. Actually, not a hike, but riding a horse up a mountainside looking for um, hallucinated wolves, is how she described it. So, like wolves that weren't real wolves, like they were hallucinated or like AI generated, maybe. Which was interesting because I'm in Utah and she'd had the dream about the horse, and we've got mountains all around us, and there's these coyotes howling in my ear. The other story was from another one of my contacts who was, she told me the story of the Wetico for the first time, really. And I'd heard this term before, of course, but the way she told it that night was that basically the darkness came and swallowed up each of the animals one by one, and then finally humanity. And then the last animal that actually resisted the darkness and summoned the courage to fight back was the coyote. That was the version that she told me, which was
Ah.
symbolic that night, of course, for obvious reasons.
That's so fascinating because when I think about the coyote in folklore, the coyote is a trickster god. And trickster gods are, God, I keep saying this. People are going to be bored of me saying this, but I think they're great because they're ambiguous. Sometimes they do something really foolish and it goes against them. Sometimes they fool people or other creatures. And so I think they're great characters because they're sort of outside of the, rigid morality rules that we're all
Yeah.
supposed to
Yeah,
follow.
yeah, yeah. Totally tons of trickster energy, if you want to say that. Loki actually, the half, I think half father of related to Odin, but half father of Sleipnir, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, Sleipnir, the steed, is a descendant of Loki, the trickster god. Um,
Didn't Loki wasn't Loki a turned into a woman? Was that was it a female horse that and then mated with I
I
don't
don't know.
remember
I
now.
mean,
There was a story.
the
Yeah.
details of how exactly you'd be a half father to an eight-legged horse steed are kind of I don't not
Yeah,
really too
that's
sure on the logistics there either.
Puck is saying hi, so that's
So
just
what
Puck,
happened
everybody.
next was after this was the profound night I spent in Utah, and that was very interesting, very symbolic. What happened after that was I went to Oklahoma to visit one more person just on my way back to Ohio. And there what happened was I we were looking up at the planes and speculating about the nature of non-human intelligence, and he takes a picture of the bottom of the wing of a Cessna that's flying overhead. And we zoom in on it, and this is some straight up pareidolia. Like, depending on how skeptical you are, this means either nothing or everything. Odin's face is clear as day underneath that plane wing. I would show the picture if I had it handy, but like scar through the eye, big bushy beard. Like I said, I'm the skeptical type, but you couldn't mistake the noise in this image under the plane wing as being Odin's face. Um, was just the
Wow, that's
icing on the
wild.
cake for this entire, story, this entire and there's a more personal side of it. Odin's story, we'll put it this way without getting too personal. Odin's story is about sacrificing for deeper wisdom, right? I mean, he had this thing with the runes, and that's I kind of liken that to my thing with coding. I love coding. Coding is, but it's a language game. It's bigger than coding. It's language. Language is extremely powerful, and that's where storytelling comes in too. And so I'd sacrifice something to go out on my little expedition, and And since I've come back, it's become clearer and clearer the kind of myth that was told within that story.
So, did you start working with Odin after that as a deity?
No, I haven't gone so far as to no, I still am not too sure how I perceive these mythological entities. And I haven't gone as far as to like work with or work toward or perform any kind of rituals or anything like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because from a folkloric perspective, it doesn't matter if you believe that there are gods and goddesses or a god or whatever, or if it's you use the symbolism of it, right? And so obviously that was some very powerful symbolism for you. And I was recently, when you're talking about the coyotes, I was recently talking to a psychic who works with Hecate. And Hecate is she's got several symbols that are tied to her. And one is a key, but the other is her
Dogs.
dogs.
Oh, that was the element of the Odin story that I didn't quite. He has his two ravens and his two dogs, and the ravens were important to the Oklahoma guide. Important symbolism of birds.
Oh,
So the dogs and the ravens played in at the end there. But I'm sorry, go on.
that's okay. That's really interesting. So I'm talking to this guy, and he's channeling his goddesses that he works with, and it was Persephone and Hecate and some other entities that I don't know. There was like one I think was named Jeff. So,
That's
uh,
my apartment. I'm living at the Jeffrey.
oh, there you go.
Yeah, right.
Synchronicity
They
right
called me
there.
Jeff in high. Yeah.
Really? Okay, so what he said was we were just talking about the symbolism. We weren't talking about like he wasn't channeling yet. And I said, well, tell me about it. And so he said, yeah, the dogs, and he was explaining that, and that she's a triple goddess. And he said, so if something happens, like you keep hearing dogs barking all the time, it may be Hecate trying to come through. And I was like, no way. And he's like, what? And I said, well, for a while now, I've been hearing dogs barking like all day long. And dogs barking in my neighborhood is not unusual because like tons of people have dogs. And I was like, but this was a little bit different because it was all day long. And usually, someone will let their dog out, it'll bark at whatever, and then they'll bring it in, and that's that. But this would be all day long, hours and hours on end. And I would get concerned, and I'm like, are these dogs outside by themselves? Did something happen to their owner? And it was in the distance a little bit. So it wasn't super loud, like loud enough to bother my work. I could just put a little music on. But when I got concerned, because it had gone on for so long, I'd go outside. And the minute I'd step out onto my porch, it would stop. And so I'm telling him this story, right? And he's like, wait, Hecate's coming through. She says, yes, 100%. It was her. She's been trying to like get through to you. And I was like, okay, well, So I'm thinking, like, should I look at like working with her? And then a couple days ago, and that this was a week ago, a week and a half ago, and a couple days ago, I hear the dog next door barking, and it's like this. It's not always there. It belongs to like the daughter of the people that live there, and it's out there barking, and it's like a yippy little dog. And so I was like, oh, there's a dog barking. And in my brain, like really loud, it was like, no, that's not me. So it was like Hecate saying, no, no, that's just a dog barking. So I thought that was kind of
Yeah,
funny.
no, Hecate played a bit of a role in my time in Utah as well, at least per my post. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, I never knew a lot about her, but I find that like when I think about the idea of like, working with these deities or connecting or channeling them or something like that, I always approach the idea with a good degree of caution just because I really deeply believe that we as like human beings are just like these are powers that we don't understand. These are
Right,
like
right.
it's like I was saying earlier, it's the boundary of coherence. Like it is not there is nothing out there. There's void and like chaos. It's like it's strange.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about working with a deity, it's more, and this is sort of, I think, a common wisdom that people talk about, that it's more like if these are powerful beings, right? And you don't just on a first meeting with someone, like you bump into someone and you're like, "Hey, I need you to help me move this weekend." Right? Like they're like, "I don't know you." And so I think the idea behind it is maintaining a relationship. And I'm taking a class right now, and what the way it was explained to me was, if you have some sort of symbol, like a statuette or something that represents whatever god or goddess you want to connect with, and you give them a little offering, right? Maybe it's a little bit of wine or a little bit of milk or some water, or maybe water with sprinkled salt in it, and then you light a candle and you just give them the offering, give them respect, and you wait to see if there's anything symbolic that seems like, oh, that's a Hecate connection, right? That is the way it's normally been explained to me. Not like you have to do some sort of big ritual every week or every month. It's a simple thing where you're just saying, I acknowledge that there's something that, is connecting us. And maybe it's connecting you to the symbolism, or maybe it's connecting you to some energy
That's
out
to me, that's
there.
what Odin's
And
story is about, is symbolism. It's those runes that he was obsessed with, the ones he sacrificed his eye to understand. It's symbols, the same way that the literal each letter on your desktop or on this screen for this Zoom meeting, that those are all symbols. And there's also these deep
right.
psychological symbols, like the symbol of the one-eyed Odin, which is apparently manifesting so strongly subconsciously that and then this is the most remarkable thing. To me, it's well beyond the realm of coincidence. I'm happy to have the conversation with a skeptic about, the probability of the dream plus the other dream plus the other dream plus the plane wing. To me, it's like, okay, there's clearly something deeper going on here. And the way I explain it, as at least from a rational perspective, and you can hold multiple perspectives at once, but from a rational perspective, what's going on there is there's something so powerful in our human connection with each other and in our subconscious mind that when I pointed the camera, it actually wasn't even me, it was actually my buddy. When he pointed the camera up at that plane wing, his subconscious directed it in just the right way and hit the button at just the
Right.
right time to capture that picture of
Mhm.
Odin's face in the recording. That's the power of
Mhm.
symbolism, I think, to me.
Right. Well, it's funny because I'm going to hold up this book now. I have just recently started reading this book. For listeners, it's called Taking Up the Runes.
Mm,
And so I've been studying the runes just recently, and I had not had an interest in it previously, like passing interest, like every once in a while. It's not my favorite form of divination, and I love divination, don't get me wrong. And again, doesn't matter if it's true or not. Doesn't matter if there's some, entity that is guiding my hand to pick this particular tarot card or whatever it is, or this rune. It's the way that the person getting the reading or giving the reading, I guess. It's the
yeah.
interpretation.
Yes, it's all in the interpretation and in the belief.
And like you all hear all the time, like people who are new into tarot, and they're like, "Oh, the death card," and then everybody would be like, "No, no, no. This could be just like an ending. Maybe a job is ending, or a relationship, or a period of your life." And they start to talk about how this could be a very positive card, right? And I think that the runes are the same way because they have it's not just an explanation, it's very specific symbolism, right? And there was I was talking to a woman about the runes, and she's very knowledgeable about runes. And she was talking about this one, I don't remember the name of it now, but it's a symbol that has to do with wealth, right? And the symbol on the rune is supposed to be like shaped like a cow, right? And because that was back way back in the day, that was wealth, right? like you could trade a cow for something you needed, or like slaughter your cow and trade the meat for something you needed. And so that's a very common um, way of interpreting this particular rune, right? And she said, but think about that, because if you look deeper, the cow, like you can't just like throw it outside and let it go. You have to take care of your cow. You have to take care of your fences. To maintain that wealth. So it's also a rune of
Mm,
responsibility. And so it was just such a fascinating, different way of looking at it. But again, it's the interpretation, right?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, none of these letters or words or symbols or runes, pictographs, they don't mean anything absent when we look at them and ascribe.
And you know, do we have a shared collective meaning for these individual runes? You see different interpretations, but if you're looking at like the Elder Futhark, right? Wherever you go, you get fairly similar interpretations, like descriptions of what they are and what they symbolize. And what we immediately do when we hear the description is we start thinking, well, what does that have to do with? Like, does that have to do with, my job? Or is it this relationship I'm in? And you start to apply the ideas to an area of your life that is concerning you. And, clearly that's where you were at with the symbolism then.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's powerful. I think meaning is powerful. Interpretation is powerful.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about your podcast and what you're trying to accomplish with it.
Absolutely.
So what's the idea behind it? What is like what's your focus? What kind of guests are you looking for? That sort of thing.
So Stitch isn't first a place for, by the way, the URL is stitch.fyi if anybody wants to check it out. And initially the idea was, I mean, perhaps controversially, it's a chatbot interface. It's an AI chatbot interface, much like ChatGPT, which a lot of people go to for their homework questions or brainstorming or what have you, right? Mostly homework questions. But the flaw, I think, in today's chatbot interfaces like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Grok on Twitter, is that they are one-on-one conversations. They actually, to me, there's a dichotomy when it comes to technology between technology that isolates you and technology that connects you. Um, and I think the myth of Pandora's box speaks to the danger of the former kind of technology, where if you empower somebody with technology at the expense of their relationship with reality, you get darkness. And so ultimately, Stitch is a place where these AI chatbots that are proliferating throughout uh, the world, really, over the past couple of years, can exist in a group context with multiple people. And part of the motivation for this is also I read headlines every day about people who have been driven into a form of psychosis by interacting with these chatbots. He is very prone to take what you give it and just amplify it and basically just yes man you until you think that until you're completely detached from reality. And there's enough
Yeah.
testaments to this online for people. I know that it's even driven people to suicide in a few cases and probably more than a few that weren't
Yeah.
publicized in the headlines. So I think that it's important that we start reaching for AI in ways that embrace human connections with each other and a real sense of community and grounding instead of just like one-on-one interfaces. But okay, beyond that, what is actually Stitch Chats as a podcast? It's an interactive podcast where each of my short conversations, 15 to 30 minutes with my guest, is going to be uploaded onto the platform. And the platform is effectively a place for group chats, and each message you can control whether it's public or not. So it's just going to be public conversations on the platform, just like the kind that you might have with your friend or with your AI buddy. And then the audience can go and make an account on Stitch and respond to the turns in the conversation between me and my guest themselves, and then me and my guest can go and write back to the audience, and it can be kind of a place where people can come together and interact and discuss any kind of variety of topics.
So it's really interesting because I was talking about the woman who is knowledgeable about runes, and her husband, their nonprofit is called the Rune Queen. And she comes out with analysis of runes every day, and they email something out that she writes up, right? But the other thing that they do, and they're in the middle of developing it, I've tried it myself, is AI, right? And I can't remember the name for their AI interface. And you go in and you ask a question. You say, "Here's the situation I've got going on. Here's what's happening in my life," and the AI will select runes that it thinks applies to your situation and then give you an analysis. And so it's slightly different than just pulling runes, but they don't it's not just like a general AI. They ended up like uploading all of her writing. So all of the stuff she's ever written about runes, and they trained it with just that. And so that's what they use. And it's not an automated process yet. Ed, who's the husband, he has to like, he goes in, he sees the question, he feeds it into the AI. The AI comes back with the answer, and then he emails it back to whoever asked the question. But I think that it's really interesting that you're looking to have this sort of AI chat, and they're looking to have this sort of I don't know, divination.
It's neat how like our algorithms can feed us stuff that is like I get on my TikTok is like I get divinations all the time and they're like really pretty freaky accurate. And I think that's just because like the algorithm is trained to show you relevant content. So
There are a few that I get. I get a lot of them, but a few that I always want to listen to. And there's one, his name is Madam Adam, and he like does a three-card spread, and he's great. He's very entertaining. I like him. There is a guy that I think is only on Instagram who does something called Crossroad Runes, and he pulls two runes, and then he sort of talks about how they like what the symbolism is where those two runes meet. So I think that those are a lot of fun. And again, it's how I interpret what they're saying. Hey, here's today's, crossroads. And I'm like, oh, well, that must be, I was thinking about breaking up with this guy, and that like completely, I gotta focus on myself and not do this. And, so yeah, I run across it, but not as much as I run across folklore stuff, happily.
yeah, naturally. No, I think it's really cool. I think AI insofar as it uh can empower people is gonna be really it's gonna be more of a tool for people to reflect upon themselves rather than something that just feeds you the answers. And that's what's so concerning, I think, about the AI industry right now is it almost seems like it's driving towards somewhere where they just want you to take the thing out of your pocket and listen to it instead of like as a tool to further yourself at all.
Yeah, I think these are conversations that will happen as technology keeps moving forward. I can go online right now, go to a site, upload some writing, and it will tell me if it's anywhere else on the internet. So it's like, plagiarism checker, right? And before the internet, that kind of thing, it was a lot harder to tell if something was plagiarized, especially for people in school. But and so I think that we'll continue to have these kind of conversations about what is possible, what is ethical, and how do we responsibly use these tools, and what happens when people don't. And there's like lots of stuff out there. There has been for a long time of just really poorly written books in the pagan space. And it's not a real writer. There's no real bio. And so, like now, I'm sure it's all just AI. But before, it was just, someone throwing together a bunch of garbage that they copied and pasted off the internet. And yeah, I mean, we have to pay attention to how we're using any of this, really.
Yeah, 100%. Technology is so powerful, and it's almost to me, it's a unifying lens. I consider myself an engineer and a builder, and to me, it's one of these deeply fundamental themes that even transcends humanity, where you have evolutionary arms races between species, and it's like technology and its dual aspect nature, where like we've used technology to kill each other since the beginning of time, but it's also what's enabling us to have this conversation. So,
Right. And, that's the interesting part. We're already seeing some fiction come up about what AI can do and what technology can do. And a lot of it is horror, right? Because we're scared of it. And I wonder, when I'm thinking about what you were saying earlier about the AI and, like spiraling people into depression and suicidal ideation and all of that kind of thing, and getting lost like outside of reality. And I wonder what kind of lore will come out of it, because I think about fairy lore, right? And that's, you step in a fairy ring, you get whisked away outside of reality, you're living in a fantasy, you eat fairy food, you get fairy money, and then later it's like straw or leaves. And the same with the aliens. You get whisked off out of your reality. You've got a whole different reality around you. And this to me, I see similarities between that kind of folklore and what we're looking at with this psychological version of it. And like you're getting sucked into the computer. And I don't like, I know people who are on like in virtual worlds. What is that one called? Second Life? And they go and like play this game where other people are playing it. And there's, all of these virtual reality worlds, and there are people who spend hours and hours and hours just gaming, and they're just like walking around in this pretend world. And it's like I don't even like I don't have time for my real life, much less like having a second life, right? Like I don't know how people do that. And that's got to be like affect your psychological viewpoint of the world as well, because you're taking on a character. It's not like in a game where you've got to go, have some quest, right? It's just wandering around as that character and meeting people and having this other experience that, I can see where that could take over your life, because I think of the experience when I read a book, right? And, you're reading this book and it's this amazing book, and then you get to the end of it and you're like, how is everyone out there just living their lives when I am like devastated that I am no longer in this world, right? So yeah, I wonder what the folklore will come out of AI.
yeah, and technology. I think it ties back into like I hear people talk about like the simulation theory or the simulation hypothesis, where like are we living in just a simulation of reality and there's some greater transcendent
Right.
reality? And like that's it's kind of a compelling thought in the context where we do have like virtual reality goggles we can just strap on, and even we have something simple as a book you can crack open and be transported to another world. So it's interesting the hierarchy of worlds.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, you look at The Matrix. There was this one movie, it was called, I want to say Existence, and it was a terrible movie. I loved it because I have no taste in movies. I will admit that freely. If it's in the genre I like it. But it was again, you there were so many layers of which was the real world. Like they were in the real world and then they go into this game, and terrible things happen, so they come out. Well, it turns out they were actually in a game, and they went into a game in a game, and then you're trying to figure out like where does it end, what's real. And so I think we've had those fears for a long time, and I'm a big fan of the theory, right? Because it's like it's really cool. But again, I also see the parallels to older stories. To me, being in a simulation is like, isn't that like the story of God and heaven? Like we get put down here, but then like our reality will be heaven.
Reminds me of the Hindu concept of Maya, of an illusion, right, of a veil. right? I think these are ideas that are a lot older than our modern metaphors for them. I mean, we have computers now that we use to describe these ideas, but I think they're pretty old.
Yeah, I go back to some of the prophets. I think of there's a prophet, Mother Shipton, and she wrote up all of these prophecies. And we don't really know who she was. We think we know, but one of the prophecies had to do with like your voice, like you voice traveling around the world. And, like first of all, people were saying, oh, it's the telephone, or oh, it's the radio, oh, it's the telephone, oh, it's the internet. And, and there was a similar thing with like horseless carriages. It's like, oh, it's the bicycle. Oh, it's, the car. It's the airplane, right? And so people, I think, apply some of those older thoughts to what we experience today, which exactly the way folklore works, right? Like if you have stories from where your family's from and you move somewhere else, like those stories are gonna morph based on the land you're now living on. Well, before we wrap things up, now I know you said earlier how people can find you. Can you repeat that?
I would go to my YouTube channel. I don't have that much of like a social media thing going on. I would say just people should message me on Stitch. They'd have to make an account. Um,
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
yeah,
Okay, well, thank you, Seth, for taking the time. This was a really interesting conversation. I'm glad we got to do it.
yeah, me too. Thanks so much.
As always, thanks for listening to Folkloring. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Facebook or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent, or creating folklore-inspired games at madmenandheroes.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep the traditions alive. And I hope that wherever you are, folklore is making your life more magical.